Exactly 20 minutes past the top of the hour. We continue apace with the day's conversations, and now we shift focus to our family conversation of the day. We talk about matters to do with child trauma, how to navigate that, intertwining it with mental health issues. My guest is here. That is Dr. Eunice Menja, who is a counseling psychologist, and she'll be helping us unpack this conversation all together. Karibu sana to the program, Dr.
Thank you very much for having me here again. Yes.
You're more like now a resident, kind of.
Yes.
To discuss matters to do with mental health. And
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's part of my calling to do this, and I love doing it.
It's your area of interest and passion.
It is my area of interest. It became my area of interest, I think, the last 20 years. But now it has become very, very clear that this is what I need to do after doing my dissertation. Yes.
All right, now before we get to trauma, let's just start with your expertise and prowess. I mean, you have over a decade just working and dealing with children, families, communities. And I'd really want to get your perspective when it comes to working with children. How is it working with them, and which specific areas do you really focus on?
Working with children requires a lot of patience. I started working with children as a Sunday school teacher, but when I went to the US, yes, I actually took my bachelor's degree in human development and family science. I did the same master's degree at Oklahoma State University in the US, and actually I specialized in just child development. Yes, and so I have worked with a lot of families. I've worked in foster care in the US. I've worked in, even just general child welfare. Yeah, and also teaching as a professor in psychology. So I teach students. Yes.
How many years of this?
Well, I have taught for about 10 years. Yes.
That's quite a long time. Now, as you said, we're going to talk about, the childhood trauma, dealing with that, intertwining it with mental health issues, because again, that is also one of those areas that you keenly focus on. And anytime we talk about mental health, it's really one of those key pertinent subjects to talk about. Just the other day was in June, the outgoing president assented to law the mental health bill after it stayed in Parliament for over 3 years, or close to 3 years around that, from National Assembly to Senate, Senate National Assembly, up until it was assented to law. So clearly one of those very key and important subjects to talk about. But for you, what is this thing that really pushed you and to give you so much energies to really deal with matters of mental health?
Yes, I have been rehabilitating children from actually abuse and neglect here in Kenya. So just taking the children in the streets, and children that have been abused and neglected, and taking them into a home. We have a children's home called Upendo Children's Home. And also when I actually started working with those children, I realized that there was a lot of trauma that was beneath just their little bodies. And so when I went to the US, and I discovered that I really loved psychology and human development at general, I decided to actually specialize when I did my PhD, looking at child sexual abuse and how that disclosure doesn't allow children to actually cope with abuse. And so I also found out when I was talking with my participants, the children that had been abused or the survivors, that there was a lot of trauma. So I'm really happy for what the country has done. Kenya, of course, we are very, very far away from where the US is in terms of mental health, but we have taken the right space in terms of taking care of mental health. I really want to see where Kenya moves to having even a helpline, like a toll-free number where somebody can call when they're about to kill themselves or commit suicide, because we have had a lot of suicides in the recent. Yes. Yes.
And you've had experience working in both areas, in the West and down here in Africa, in Kenya to be specific. I mean, what is our undoing? Why don't we take such issues with the seriousness that it deserves? And also, as you respond to that, how would you compare how these two countries, or should I say two states, deal with matters with mental health issues, trauma, drug abuse, addiction?
If I were to compare, I think I would say probably it's almost like comparing apples to oranges, because Kenya being a developing country and the US being a developed country, it's very, very hard to definitely compare. But we do know, like, even in the US, we have a lot of mental issues problems. People are lobbying for it. It has now been actually included in the healthcare plan. So when you go for mental health services, they're actually considered as part of your mental health, so it can be covered by insurance, which is very, very good. When I did my marriage and family therapy courses, that was one of the things that our professors actually stressed on, that we have to be advocates for our clients and be advocates of our communities, and that's what I have been doing. But then when I actually brought the childhood trauma training workshops here in Kenya from the US with a lot of other expertise, I found out that I was helping America, which is already having a lot of resources. But then I found out that my family members, my loved ones here in Kenya, were also suffering. So that is why actually I started Ponca Health Mental Health Clinic. So some of the things that I know, like even in the US, actually suicide is the second cause for death for children between 9 years to 25 years. So that is very, very high, as in being a risk factor. One of the things that actually children die often in the US is because of suicide. Number one being car accident. So in Kenya, I want to say I'm not sure because we don't have a lot of data, but World Health Organization have actually, recorded that we have about 700,000 that killed themselves in a year. So in Kenya, we have to do a lot more research, not just, the things that we watch on social media. But what I know is that in the US, we have a lot of resources. As I said, we have a toll-free number. I actually know it offhand because I talk with a lot of people. It's 1-800-273-TALK. We would love to have such a number where when you're in Kenya and you feel like you want to end your life, you can call that number and it is not charged on you. So the government can come up with that because you have people online that are always wishing to help you, or trained therapists that can actually reach to you and tell you that it is not time to kill yourself, you shouldn't kill yourself, and give you at least those coping mechanisms. What I have realized is that of course, in Kenya, we know that when people post on social media, whether they are joking or not joking, you will see that people actually put more fire. So you say, I want to commit suicide, and people start asking you on social media, what do you need to kill yourself? Can I send you money to buy poison and things like that? So we need to educate our communities. The last time I was here, we talked about being trauma-informed, society or community, to whereby when you are talking to any human being without noticing without them telling you that they're going through trauma, we should always be sensitive and of course show empathy and compassion. Yes. Well
said. I mean, and we can clearly agree, and also much has been said in respect to that yes. For policies, we have them. We have just minutes ago talked about the mental health bill that really got a push from Parliament for it to be assented to law to protect persons, with such kind of challenges. But we keep saying oftentimes that the problem is not that, because ideas we have, policies, they're already on paper. The problem is implementation. Where are we missing it?
I want to say that when it comes to mental health in the US, having been trained even with my master's degree, when I said I wanted to become a therapist, I was sent back to class. That is the first thing. We have a lot of ideas, but sometimes you'll find that even here in Kenya, we have not streamlined the mental health care as in terms of controlling, even in terms of qualifications and things like that. That need to be streamlined first. We have a lot of laws in Kenya. Again, we know that they are sometimes they're never implemented. We do have laws to protect children from abuse. We do have laws to protect women from domestic violence, but most of the times when it gets to the ground, they're not implemented, they're not enacted, and people don't feel safe. Even when it comes to mental health, you don't know who to go to because you're not sure whether the person you're going to is actually trained to do that work, because it requires a lot of training to become a therapist. It requires a lot of training to call yourself a psychologist, which is something that I'm finding also a little bit funny, that somebody can go for 2 courses training and call themselves counselor, and then allowed to take care of mental health.
Just because someone feels they can talk to and encourage you, then they feel I'm a qualified psychologist.
There is more than just talking in counseling. There's more than just talking to somebody in therapy. Just like cancer, we need qualified doctors or qualified therapists that can actually take care of somebody, because mental health is not something that you actually see. It's not something that you can test using a laboratory equipment. So it is something that really need a lot of training and somebody who is qualified to sit down with somebody and actually assess and use the right tools to make sure that that person is protected and they can feel safe, because we need a safe community. Just the other day, and it's something that I actually shared on my social media, I'm still grieving because one of my daughter's best friend committed suicide in Canada. She was from Africa. So we're talking about childhood trauma that follows people all the way up to that adulthood. This wasn't a kid that she slept in my house many times. I couldn't tell that she was depressed. I didn't know that she was depressed. But I wonder
if you are trained.
I am a trained therapist. Because
imagine.
You can look at somebody and know that they are stressed or they are carrying some type of trauma or they are depressed. They would have to tell you. But does somebody feel safe to tell you, to disclose to you what they have gone through? Because trauma is caused by a lot of things. There is something that we call childhood adversity experiences that range from sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, poverty, things like your parents were imprisoned, or maybe your parents were using alcohol and drugs and things like that. So when you have all those experiences as a child and you're growing up, all those things pile up. And so as an adult, you didn't deal with them. So you're trying to actually figure out yourself. You're dealing with identity crisis. You're pursuing your career. You're trying to develop relationships. And something just can trigger that trauma. And one day you just snap. And, you find yourself committing suicide, even though you looked healthy.
Yeah. It's really quite a lot.
Yeah.
And sorry for your loss.
Yeah. Thank you. We're trying to deal with that by honoring that girl. She was part of our ministry at Upendo. She always helped. She was actually pursuing her master's degree in Canada. And one of the things that we are going to do, because we have a counseling center we are building at Upendo, is that we are going to actually name one of the rooms after her, so that just to remember her. That's something that we have promised our family. Yeah.
All right, well said. And now, so then, yes, you are in that position. And as we said, you are a trained psychologist, trained counselor. You have practiced this in, 10 years plus. But even at that, you still couldn't really quite detect. So now, in hindsight, when you look back, what are some of those things that perhaps you saw that you could even perhaps a viewer who's watching or a parent that, those things that they would perhaps spot even in their children, that they would need to ensure that they take care of them before they become stories that we'll now be talking about later in respect to the things they've gone through in life that would say these are now signs of trauma?
There are there might be a million of symptoms, but just to summarize them, and I think I summarized them in my little book that I wrote in the US after dealing with a lot of families that have gone through the same issue of suicide and depression. Things like when a child is quiet and they were not quiet before, somebody tries to just keep to themselves. They want to lock themselves into the room. They don't want to talk about anything. They lose interest in things that they like. Maybe it's a child that liked to play soccer, a child that liked to dance or something like that, and all of a sudden they start saying, I don't want to go. Other things like, when a child comes home...
And at this point, it's with no reason?
With no reason.
Okay.
So that's the time now when you have to start that relationship. You have to have that relationship to whereby you can actually notice that your child is not okay. Loss of appetite is one other thing. When a child is crying all the time and there's no reason, sometimes it's loss of appetite. A lot of times is, just having headaches from nowhere and stomach aches, and they are actually even throwing up. It's a sign of something is wrong if it is not a medical issue. So if you have a relationship with your children, especially parents, I know that parents here sometimes get to be very busy. Children are being raised by nannies and maids and things like that, or grandparents, and parents are not there to actually detect the signs. You have to know your child enough to actually read those signs, those symptoms, symptoms so that you can tell when there's a difference in emotions, in their behavior, if they look sad and things like that. And sometimes kids don't want to get out of their room. They don't want to take a shower. Those are also some of the other things that you can actually look up for. Yeah.
So basically those things that would look peculiar in a moment that never would have happened naturally.
Yes.
Those are things that sort of like look up for.
Yeah.
That will tell you something is quite amiss.
Yeah.
You need to do more than what you do, even just as a parent or a guardian.
And you need to be spending a lot of time with your kids so that you can also know that. I think in terms of curbing depression and suicide, even in this country or anywhere in the world, it is not something that is actually single discipline. It's multi-discipline. People come together, teachers, bankers, preachers, parents, professors, so that we can all come together and actually determine what type of resources do we give to people when they are in our spaces. Whether I'm an employer, I should be well trained to be trauma informed and to provide that type of support if I know that my employees are suffering. Because when someone loses somebody, how do we take care of that besides going for mashakaya, besides meeting and contributing money and then leaving the family to just deal with the stress? And we are not recommending things like grief counseling. It is very, very important because how people deal with stress is very, very different depending on their genetic makeup and also their past, their history, the things that they have experienced. Because you probably just need one thing, like loss of an income, loss of elections, and actually kill yourself. So anything can push you to the edge, and that's when we have to all be aware and work together and actually sensitize even our incoming government. How can we tap into to the expertise that we have? We have a lot of people that have returned from diaspora, maybe have even practiced more years than me. Other people that are trained and they don't have jobs. How can we actually include them in planning for mental health in this country, and so that we can protect children and even older people? Yes.
And I really like the examples that you've put forth, like loss of an income, loss of an election. You are a supporter, because you oftentimes think that it's only the event of death that may really result to depression and mental health issues. I mean, nonetheless, when you talk about hidden trauma, what is this?
Hidden trauma is something that is actually burrowed down. You are skied and you can't see it, but it's really something that is, something that you didn't deal with. Probably you lost
your early days.
Yes, you lost a loved one, and that stress was just hidden there, and you suppressed it, and you're not working towards eliminating it or just dealing with it. What we do as therapists is not that we actually tell people that you have to, take away that trauma and take it out of you. Trauma is part of us. Remember when I was here last time, I talked about even COVID trauma, things that actually make you bring that flashback that is scary, that fear. What we do is that we give people tools. We give them strategies to be able to deal with this trauma. So if I lost my grandmother, which I've actually never overcome, I lost my mother, I've never overcome, all that stress is actually adding up. Anything that is going to happen on daily basis is probably going to re-traumatize me. I'm going to have flashbacks of maybe my mom, maybe, the last moment that I had with her, the last talk that I had with her. That is part of trauma, but are you able to deal with that? Because it becomes negative when it actually starts impacting your health. So it is your body is actually coping by producing more stress rather than calming yourself down. I don't know, when I met with you, I talked about some of the things that we actually use.
And actually that's where I wanted us to get to, the coping mechanisms.
Yes, the coping mechanisms. So for the children, we call it play therapy. So if you bring your child to Ponca Mental Health Clinic and you tell me what the symptoms that you're observing, I'm going to do my own assessment. And actually after that, I will describe or prescribe what type of play therapy that I'm supposed to use with children. Especially children, you don't talk a lot with them. You provide them tools to actually cope with stress. So just this stress ball, I don't know if you have touched it and felt it. It's something that you can actually buy it from any store, I think from most of the toys.
So just before you go on, this is how you work yourself around it?
Just work with it, and sometimes you...
It actually does feel nice.
Yes, so when you are telling a child to talk about maybe some of the, maybe most tragic events that happened. The other day I had a teenager that came to our clinic, and they actually had witnessed their mom being hit by a car. So an accident happened, and she was a witness, and their mom ended up dying. And she's never dealt with that. 9 years down the line, she has tried to commit suicide twice. So when I give her that ball, even though she's a teenager, I was trying to tell her, take out your anger, and every time you feel like you're angry, squeeze that ball.
Just like this?
Just squeeze it. Close your eyes and squeeze it. Deal with that anger.
What is the effect of this? Just doing this?
It is a sensory tool, so it actually works together with your senses to send, of course, your, the neural system sends a message to your brain, and it actually produces, that hormones that help you to calm down. We also have other things like just Legos that we give to quickly, especially kids. Sometimes, when I'm teaching even college students, I know that there are students that will bring these tools. A lot of times teachers think that children are not paying attention.
Okay.
And so you want to tell, keep that toy away, you're not paying attention. But what that child is probably doing, they're taking their mind away from that trauma. So it probably is a tool that they are using to help them cope. So instead of telling that child to put that toy away, try to find out as a teacher or as a parent, why are you not paying attention?
Okay.
Are you okay? What does that make you feel when you're squeezing that ball in the classroom? Because maybe they're dealing with something, like something traumatic, abuse, or even a death in the family. Yes.
And I'm so sure there are perhaps various other tools, but since you're pinched for time...
I have very many toys.
You're already pinched for time, and I can already hear my director saying that we need to exit the stage.
Okay.
And perhaps you can explore more of those tools, coping mechanisms momentarily. Because, as we said, this is a conversation that cannot end. We are still in that space.
Yes.
And so the more we talk about it, the better for us.
Yes.
Nonetheless, asante sana for making time.
Asante.
And just talking to us a bit about what we can do in respect to, moving away or living and the different coping mechanisms we can employ even as we deal with this.
Yes.
Such a cogent discussion.
Yes, it is a lot. So if anybody wants to come to our clinic, our number is 0715-780-586. And we can actually either refer or actually help them deal with trauma. But we have a lot to talk about. So we, yes.
Yeah. Well said. So that is Dr. Eunice Menja, who is a counseling psychologist, of course, just talking to us about living with childhood trauma, intertwining that with mental health issues, and what you and I can do, or perhaps people that perhaps suffering from this, how you can aid in helping them, in respect also how they can cope with issues such as this. Good place to end. Good morning, Kenya. Many thanks for watching. I'm Doreen Arange Okello. On behalf of the entire team, asante sana. Paving way for News Check, coming in a bit.